thank you everyone for being here. Just to kind of start out, show of hands, who knows if their company uses POs to process cloud invoices? Like, pretty good. Who would like not to use POs? Cool, yeah, so, okay, these are our people. Today we're gonna talk about Salesforce's journey to getting to no PO. So really that path to eliminating purchase orders and streamlining the invoice processing and cost allocation. My name is Jenna Gegg. I'm a public cloud cost manager at Salesforce.
And I'm Omkar Gokhale. I'm also a public cloud cost manager at Salesforce, and thank you for having us all.
So a quick run through of what to expect today. We'll start out by giving you a quick introduction to Salesforce as well as our public cloud footprint. Next, we'll dive into some of the challenges we were experiencing with managing cost on purchase orders, as well as that cost allocation process. Then we'll talk about some of the goals that we had in mind as we were reimagining what the invoice processing process could look like. Then we will talk about the actual solution itself, which we call Prism. Omkar will go over that. And then we'll wrap up with some takeaways that we learned during the process, as well as some what's ahead in this space for us.
Cool. Thank you, Jenna. So Salesforce is a big CRM company, world's leading CRM, as you know, and we were one of the first companies to put business software in the cloud. So we have a big old love affair with all the cloud providers, but we have a 360-degree suite of products: Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud, Commerce Cloud, a lot of clouds. But we have some new products like, Net Zero Cloud, Industries Cloud, and we made some acquisitions, a lot actually. But in integration space like MuleSoft, in analytics space like Tableau, and collaboration communication space are older, Slack. But we all use cloud and super heavy multi-cloud users. But we are focused on AWS as it's our biggest cloud provider. So to manage all these great products and across multiple clouds, we need a killer team. So we are part of public cloud enablement team, part of tech sourcing under global procurement, and we roll into FinOps or under CFO. So we kind of distribute our responsibility into three ways: enablement, we look at account management, onboarding new accounts, sustainability, M&A integrations, and marketplace management. That's one part of our responsibilities. The others are operations. These are our day-to-day tasks like, cloud cost reporting across the company, building dashboards, optimizations across multiple cloud providers, across multiple services, and across the whole company. Vendor management, purchasing RIs and savings plans across multiple clouds, across multiple business units. Again, any questions anybody has within the company regarding their own cloud costs, we kind of cater to those questions as well. And billing, working with finance, integration, and accounting to pay for those cloud bills. We all do that on a day-to-day basis. So we have some rock stars that work on those things. And lastly, tools and architecture. We believe in innovation and building our own tooling to support some of our internal use cases. So we have some folks who work on tooling and development, software engineering. So, now we have great products, we have a killer team, but what keeps us awake at night, right? It's the scale. Because Salesforce is so huge, the scale is always a challenge. And by the way, this is Jenna and I going to work every day with our backpacks on, going above and beyond the clouds to get a good view of the business. And we look at our thousands and thousands of cloud accounts and 50 plus business units and huge cloud spend, and just say, wow, what a view. But fun things aside, there are challenges when you work at this scale. Every decision we make has to go through the scale discussions in the pipeline, right? And we're going to talk about one such challenge today. Jenna?
Thank you. Where there's challenges, there's hopefully opportunities to make things better. So when we look back to like 2019 is when we were first kind of looking at how can we make the current process better. So to tell you a little bit about that process, on a monthly basis, we were receiving 30 plus invoices that we needed to process and then allocate, across the different business units and get them to AP for processing via POs. And sometimes you might have one billing account that has 12 different BUs on it. Oh, but this BU also has some spin on this billing account. So you can imagine things can get a little complex. And how do you know if you got all 30 invoices one month? I don't know. Very PO driven. And it put us at the risk, of course, of not paying an invoice when you were out of funds on your PO, you were waiting to get approvals, and you can imagine in this financial climate, often those approvals really have to go up a number of levels, and you don't want to keep, bothering Mark Benioff for an approval, so we want to stay away from that. In terms of cost allocation, again, we allocate costs to over 50 different business units. And in the previous process, it required frequent adjustments and ad hoc kind of configuration, this and that. To give you an idea, it was like an Excel spreadsheet with 25 plus tabs. And maybe one person could figure out what was going on in a given month. Not a great place we were in. In terms of the workload management and automation, multiple resources were involved from accounting and finance, one of our global services team, multiple days, multiple resources to get this whole invoicing process through for payment. And showing back any of that data was quite difficult. There was really no central repository to go look at to see what happened, month to month. In addition to that, it was really unclear when you needed to look back at a previous month if a question came up and try to figure out why something was the way it was. So to lay out the kind of before process, we think about at the beginning of a year, we would kick off raising a number of POs for all the different business units, working with finance to approve those POs based on budget amounts, right? Great. Then we have the business out there, they're using the cloud, great, spending all kinds of money. On a monthly basis, or really it's more of a daily basis, but we're ingesting that data into, we use a third-party tool called Cloud Health, if you've ever heard of them, to ingest all of that data. As we got to the end of the month, we would work with our partners in accounting to extract that data manually out of Cloud Health, split it into the different business units to be able to do the accrual from an accounting standpoint for the month. End of the month closes. We finally get our invoices from AWS, and we kind of go through that process of, again, of, okay, now we have all of our invoice amounts. We gotta do the allocation actually, get it all in a file to send it to AP for payment, posting against those POs. Again, multiple days, multiple hands in the process. Some of the key concerns, again, as we touched on, POs don't limit your spend or manage your spend, right? Your cloud spend's what it's going to be. So they're not a great tool in this process. Also, the reporting that we had was not great, and we knew that a lot of improvements could be had in that area. And then really to hit on the last point, difficult to scale. So a big part of Salesforce core product that had sat on-prem in our own data centers, we knew was moving to the public cloud, and that was going to be huge. Still happening. It's huge. So we needed to scale our process because this multi-day, multi-person thing was not going to cut it. And 6 months, a year down the road. Right. So what were our goals in the process? The biggest one, no POs. Let's get away from them. And we knew what that would take is we needed to determine a new method of validating the invoice spend and being able to demonstrate that we had the authorization to pay those invoices. Because in the past, that's what a PO served as. It was the budget amount, you're good to go as long as you're in your budget. So we need to rethink that and come up with a way to be able to authorize that we can pay those invoices. We needed a system that was going to be flexible to support different types of allocations that we would need to do across different business units. We want to be able to charge any spend to any GL account that we might need to charge it to. And again, we need to be able to think about what might be coming down the road as things evolve in the cloud space. Automation, yes, no more pulling manual reports. So we wanted to think about how can we automate the gathering of all this data to come together and get rid of that need of pulling reports at a different time, trying to get them consolidated and rolled up. As we touched on, we need to be able to scale, and additionally, some auditing would be great, figuring out what happened and who changed what and why. Lots of improvement could be made in that area. And then lastly, and the biggest one was stakeholder buy-in. So we knew we were not going to be able to change our process unless we had everyone under the sun involved. So we working with our partners in accounting and finance, AP, as well as both our internal and external auditors to get sign-off to say, yes, this new process, it's great, it's good, you're good to go. All right, so this looks familiar, right? We have our before. And to give you an idea of what the after looked like, it's very similar, but a little different. So as we start the process, we see that we have finance approving a budget, but no longer are there POs involved. What happened? Again, the business is out there using the cloud. And now is where our special kind of sauce and solution comes in. That's the Prism, or as illustrated here, the Salesforce cost allocation layer, which really is a combination of harnessing the power of our third-party tool, as well as with internal information to be able to do both the accounting accrual at the end of the month, and then, again, once our invoices come in, be able to process them and get them paid for approval. Next, Omkar is going to give us a look at what our solution looks like under the hood.
Yeah, so we call our solution Prism, Integrated Cost Processing System, and this is how it looks on architectural level. So Prism takes inputs from multiple sources, internal and external. So we have budgets by business units, mapping accounts to business unit and subgroups within the company. We have some allocation rules, some logic that defines how the cost will be allocated across the company, and some manual adjustments and some entries we might have to add if required. So that goes in as internal company data to the system. Then until we receive invoices, we have to get cost data from somewhere, right? So we get it from our third-party vendor, Cloud Health, for accrual for phase one. And when we have invoices from the cloud providers, we feed in those real numbers from the cloud providers, in this case AWS. And what we get out of the system is detailed cost allocation file and another file for accounts payable to process for payment. So it's all automated and just takes like 5 minutes to run. Good thing about this is everything that goes into Prism and happens behind the scenes in Prism, it's locked and loaded into a database. So it's auditable, reportable, and it's like a data source you can extract and put in anywhere you want. So folks like engineering, finance, and any other leadership can access those records. These are like point-in-time records in the database. So if you like that and still find it interesting, we can take a look under the hood with some snapshots. So this looks like a Google Sheet because it is a Google Sheet, but it's super powerful. On the top, you provide your inputs, what month you want to run it. You want to run it as final or just a random run in between. What phase are you running it for? So we spoke about it earlier. We run it in 2 phases. Phase 1 is basically the accrual for accounting, where you get estimates based on when invoices are not available. We pull in data from Cloud Health. And P2 is basically when we have actual invoices. So what you see on the bottom, the status fields, is basically a live commentary of what's happening behind the scenes when we are running the process. So as you can see the timing, it probably takes 5 minutes, right? Yeah, it takes 5 minutes. All right, let's go deeper and see how configuration data is loaded and how it looks for us. So we have business unit configurations. Each business unit and subgroup, they have accounting GL string assigned to it, and they have monthly budgets tied to those BU and subgroup combos. Next, we have AWS account configuration. Each AWS account is mapped to a business unit and subgroup, so that's how we kind of allocate our costs. And then you saw in the previous slide, there's some allocation rules and manual adjustments. So we kind of bake that into the system, into the process, and basically this is what we get as a cost allocation file. We have a cost initial based on initial cost given by Cloud Health, because we don't have invoices yet for P1. So that's basically the end of P1. We submit this to accounting for their accrual estimation for the month, and then we move on and we get invoices from AWS. When we do get invoices, we load that data in addition to our initial configurations. Basically, we reload everything and run the process all over again. Why? Because it takes only 5 minutes. So we load the invoices with basically real numbers, and again, process through the automation. It goes and gets us the cost allocation file. In the meantime, it works out any differences or deltas that may happen between invoices and our calculated cost, basically. So the deltas can be because there's some credit memos that arrive late, or some EDP contractual related things that are not part of Cloud Health's logic and not part of our P1. So there are some deltas. We allocate those deltas based on its billing share across all our cost centers, business units. And we, again, get a cost final. That's basically a final allocation, finalized numbers with real invoice data from our cloud providers. So we submit this to accounting and finance for their month-end closure process. So you have seen the process now, but you're not yet sure if it's all correct, right? So we do have some validation checks in the system where we check if all cost is accounted for or not. So every AWS account needs to be mapped to a BU subgroup, and if that's not happened before in the process, it gets flagged here. Let's say 5 accounts don't have a BU subgroup, so we go back and assign those accounts a BU and subgroup and all the mappings that follow, and we rerun the process again. We check if the cost totals align between invoice cost, calculated cost, and the final cost. And we, again, manual adjustments, all the deltas are allocated properly. We just check that and check for differences. All looks okay here in the screen for me. And then for SOX controls, one of the controls is we check the budget plan with our actual spend and check if it's in the limits. So we help our SOX team being compliant with the process here. So this makes our life much easier than somebody in the system, multi-resource. One resource making one mistake, and you reopen 25 tabs to find out that mistake, or even you don't know if you made that mistake in the first place. So it helps tracking because we have logs. And so how big of an impact has this made on our system at our scale in the company, right? So Jenna, want to talk through that?
Right. Thank you. So when I think about the impact that has been made, I really think about the maturing of a number of our capabilities. So we're still at the end of the day allocating costs back out to business units and processing invoices. Like, that's still happening. It's just happening in a much more mature manner. It's a process going to scale with any growth. If we get back to the office and all of a sudden we got 10,000 new AWS accounts open, okay, cool. No, we need to assign them to a business unit, but the process itself, maybe it's going to take 6 minutes to run this time instead of 5. Whereas we would have probably needed to add a couple more heads and resources and days to the old process. It's really put a lot of streamlining around the operations that were occurring, so everyone has a very clear understanding of the process, where to go look for things, where the official final numbers are. We've hit on already the reduction of the workload. This process now is auditable, so if a question comes up, why is this this business unit, its costs went up? oh, okay, it looks like an account got reassigned to your business unit from a different business unit, and Omkar made that change because finance told him to. Whereas before, we would have no clue what happened, why the change was made. We have much deeper analytics available now that everything's in a database. We can use that data, other teams can use that data, where before we didn't have that in place. As we've mentioned, this is SOX compliant, and no longer do we have POs involved in the process. So say goodbye to the 50 or so POs and all of that overhead. Again, to how did we get rid of them? Really, it involved changing the method, saying, okay, because we have budgets from finance, and if your spend for that quarter is within your budget to a, let's say 5% threshold, you are authorized to make that payment. And on a quarterly basis, we get updated budget numbers for the quarter from finance. As you may know, budgets change. In the old PO process, that was at the beginning of the year kind of set, so less flexibility there, as to where now each quarter we're getting any updates to those numbers, and that gives us the authorization to go ahead and process those invoices for payment. All right, last we're going to wrap up with some takeaways and what's ahead. So the biggest takeaway is the stakeholder sign-off. Took way, way longer than we expected, and took more time and effort to get finalized than any of the development behind the solution. So one thing that we did while we were waiting for that sign-off is we executed our old terrible process along with the new Prism process in parallel. And that really gave us the confidence that, yes, this is going to work when this goes live into production. Like, it's solid. Like, we feel good about this. And also, wow, it is so much better. So much better. 5 minutes. This is great. And then I think we hear kind of this theme a lot of building small and improving on it. You might not have the final solution, right away. You make tweaks as you go, but just getting something out there in incremental steps really has a lot of benefits, and you can get feedback a lot more quickly. And some of the things that we have since added to our process is the ability to support the allocation of AWS support back to linked accounts based on basically like their percentage of the bill. We didn't have that before. We also had the development of another tool that we call Nimbus. It's basically just a database. And previously, Nimbus was living in, let's say, Prism. It's basically all of our account configuration data, all the business unit configuration data, along with like the GL accounts and the budget. We have since pulled that out of Prism, so now they just kind of talk to each other, but Nimbus can also talk to other things. So I work a lot in the resource optimization space, so I can leverage the data that sits in Nimbus to figure out, who are the team contacts, who can I email this information to. Partners in security can also leverage that data. We recently implemented into Nimbus a synchronization agent with AWS organizations. So we have over 30 different AWS organizations running. And so on a daily basis, we go out, we leverage the AWS organizations API, and we automate the creation of any new accounts that have been created. We bring that into Nimbus on a daily basis, so that at the end of the month, Omkar no longer needs to add 500 new records to our database. They will already be there. We will just have to make sure they have a business unit and subgroup assignment so that any of the expenses that they've incurred can be allocated. And then lastly, we are working on onboarding any of our Azure spend and GCP spend to the Prism process. Again, technically, we're ready to go, just waiting on all the sign-offs from our stakeholders. That's sort of a bit of what's ahead for us as it relates to Prism. And thank you guys so much for being here, and hopefully you found some inspiration of how you may be able to reimagine the world of invoice processing and cost allocation.
We got time for we got time for a few questions.
Thanks for the talk. I imagine if I went to my purchasing department with this, right, there would be a lot of resistance. And you guys mentioned that with the approvals, the SOX approvals, all that was the most like cumbersome part, right, versus the development. Can you detail like how did you get buy-in? Was there resistance? Because I can see a lot of purchasing departments kind of flipping their minds over this, right?
Yeah, I think as first step is figuring out, okay, if a decision is going to be made, who all needs to be in the room? Like, is it accounting, accounts, purchasing needs to be involved, and find out who your stakeholders are. And I think relating cloud spend to other spend that we don't use POs for kind of helps the conversation get started. Utilities or things like that you might not be using a PO for today. And again, like, what is the purpose of a PO? If we focus on that, can we achieve whatever that purpose is still, but reimagine it in a different way? So for us, that was, okay, we have quarterly budgets that we know are approved and good. And so if we can validate that the spend comes in aligned with that, yeah, we can consider that authorization to go ahead and make that payment.
Yeah, and the before and after process you saw, right? That's the simpler version. So for the sign-off, we had to showcase more complicated workflows of how things are flowing from each system, right? And to get basically the approval, and the parallel running of our current process and previous, the newer process worked, because we could showcase that this is a good proof of concept and it can provide similar or basically same results as with the POs, but we eliminate the process and be compliant with SOX. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Next question.
Hi. So what have you done for the vendors that require POs? And I've got like 3 questions. So how are you handling the vendors that require POs, right? How are you delineating project costs from sustained costs for these cloud spends? Is that something that's inside of your Prism?
So on the vendors that require POs, I don't know the answer to that question. I think that anytime that we do have POs, they're for like non-related cloud type spend. So I don't know that I have a great answer to your first question. For the second question, basically we have our every AWS account in this scenario has an assignment back to a business unit and kind of subgroup area. And if we wanted to look at like ongoing spend or not, that wouldn't necessarily, we wouldn't have like the level of detail in the Prism application. That would be something that we would rely more on, like, okay, let's go look at third party for specific details around the type of spend. Because basically with Prism, it's your total spend by account is like the level of detail that is coming, and not all the granularity of nuances around which services and things of that nature.
Cool. Final question.
Thank you for your presentation. I really like the part, and it's very good for Salesforce. But for us, when are you open sourcing Prism now? Right? We want to use your tool. When are you open sourcing that tool?
That's open for discussion. But definitely, that's why we wanted to demonstrate how we did it, right? So like you said, there are some internal data coming in from Salesforce that how we manage our spend, how we allocate our costs, right? So you may have a different way of doing things, but there is a way where we can all eliminate POs by loading your own internal data. But yeah, it's open for discussion, like I said.
Cool. Thank you so much. Can I get an atomic applause for both of you? Thank you.
Thanks for watching that session. I'm sitting here in San Diego right after FinOps X. We hope you join us next year here live 2024. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel and join the community. Get involved, join the summits, get in a working group, and don't forget to get FinOps certified. Because next year here in San Diego for FinOps X, it's going to be twice as big. Come join the party. Come meet your people. Welcome home.